mainland Europe, as far as I remember. And please, Joao, the floor is yours. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for this very kind invitation. I'll do my best to present everything in less than 15 minutes. So I will skip through some slides and hopefully you'll all understand what I have presented here. And if you don't, please let me know in questions. Feel free to interact any way you might feel suited. So I'm going to talk about climate adaptation in Cascais. So first of all, like it was presented, we are indeed a coastal municipality turned to the Atlantic. We are approximately 100 square kilometers, but 1/3 of our land is protected landscape. So for that conjugation between proximity with the capital of Lisbon, natural resources, natural heritage, and cultural heritage, we are a very well-renowned tourist destination, which increases our yearly population quite significantly every year. So we've been facing some climate challenges already in Cascais. We've been noticing more coastal erosion. We've been noticing an increase of storms, of severe weather storms, of flooding, but also for fires, especially fires outside what it is considered the normal fire season, and other elements like that, like heat waves and so on. So a quick example is the photo on the bottom right, which is the Abano beach, which was considered as a beach, and now it was formally removed as a beach, the classification from the National Environmental Agency, because it lost sand and it wasn't safe enough to be considered one. So that's a tangible aspect of what we consider an intangible conversation usually, which is climate change. So there it is, tangible impacts. So we started roughly 12 years ago with our strategic plan for climate change, where we made a thorough assessment about the climate impacts that we would be facing in different sectors. So water resources, coastal biodiversity, agriculture, human health, and tourism. So that ranges from us humans and our activities into the ecosystems where we're living. And we must understand exactly what are the impacts that we're going to face in the future. So this is how it all started. We had IPCC scenarios coming through and it worked really well. So with these scenarios, we immediately started to work. So we worked together with other departments and other institutions here at local scale, because climate change is such a broad subject. We need to bring everybody on board, including stakeholders and private citizens, individuals, to this challenge as well. And obviously we work together with the European Union because their funding has been crucial for us to build our collaboration networks, but also to implement actions here in Cascais. So we've been doing a lot of that. However, in 2017, obviously with the new regulations, the updated methodologies, and the national and international commitments, we started our action plan for adaptation. So this was an updated scenarios. It was duly integrated with the SDGs, the UN SDGs 2030, namely the 13th SDGs, which is climate action. And it was finally approved in town hall. That means that this climate action plan is mandatory for us to implement, so at political level, and we're definitely doing that. So we worked together with a lot of stakeholders in different sectors. We brought their expertise here because when we're talking about climate change, there is really no expert that is just expert on climate change. And on the other way around, there's not an expert that is that understands for example, the heat waves, fire hazard, and biodiversity impact, and at the same time, the health impact on humans that it has, namely in the summer. So we have to bring these different types of stakeholders all together and work in a very productive way and a collaborative way. So this way we capture as much as knowledge as we can. We did this together with the base adaptation. So all this information is online. These working methodologies were extremely useful for us. And we changed something that was very important for us. On the left side, you see the graphics with the RCP scenarios. So for temperature and temperature increase, and also for rain variables. So usually what we provided as climate experts was this type of information. However, when we brought people for the action part, where they are not experts on meteorology or weather or climate, they must understand, and we must translate this into their own knowledge. So we started to use, and we started to write something that goes a lot like what you see on the right side. So these climatic variables are what matters at all. For example, we will see a decrease of average precipitation, approximately 1/3. We'll have an increase of the average temperature, more particularly the summer maximum temperatures. We'll have an increase of sea level rise. So if you see on my own photograph behind me, on the top of my head, there's a tide gauge here that's been measuring the tides and the sea level rise for 100 and nearly 150 years now, and it has registered 15 centimeters of sea level increase. So that's a scientific evidence that we already have. So this is some elements that we try to communicate to people, and we communicate this way so people understand, how does this impact me? So obviously, because it's a climate action, we have actions. So in this case, 13 measures that comprise 82 actions, to be more precise. So we need overall a bit over 111 million of investment, and we need to implement these actions through the next 10 years. So, well, now 9, but you'll see where we are. So if you look at them, you will see that the top priority is stakeholder awareness. And this is interesting because all the different groups, the stakeholder groups, the sectorial groups, they all said that this is the top priority, which was extremely interesting for us. And if you notice through the list, you will see that most of them are green structures. So that means that we are greening the city, we are restoring the ecosystems and their services, and also non-structural, which means that we are capacitating people, we are capacitating our systems, and we are changing the laws to comply with climate adaptation. So that's non-structural. But at the same time, we do have some gray solutions or gray infrastructures, as we call it, but they are mostly for water infrastructure. And it's something that it's very specific to us because we don't have our own source of water. We have to get water from elsewhere. So there's a big piping system that brings the water to the Lisbon region, and we get it from there, most of it. Obviously, that does make us a bit vulnerable to get this, only the source, but I'm pretty sure that we are working on new technology sooner or later to be a bit more resilient on this term. But this is just an example that in our case, we mostly need gray infrastructures for water supply. And another thing that we've learned is that we reply transversally to most of the Sustainable Development Goals 2030, which is very interesting, and it's something that we also learned as well. So let's see what we are going through. So remember that I said we had 6 sectors before, but we've learned that to work on them, we actually had to have different working groups. So the first working group is adaptation for awareness and education. That summarizes the number of measures and actions into this. So we've organized climathons, we organized training sessions, we organized photo exhibits on the public streets so people could engage and have a visual impact on their lives with the climate change impacts, so they can see that this is something tangible. We worked with schools. We have a school program for climate change where children learn about climate change and how they can act individually in their own families and in their community. We've trained and upgraded, let's call it upgraded professionals, because they usually, a given professional has only training in his sector, but usually not on climate change. So by bringing climate change, we make their work even more relevant. This is particularly seen on, for example, urban planning. This is visible seen on health and education and so on. So we've been working together to qualify our technical staff, but also citizens alike that they want to learn more professionally or individually. We've done something very well. We will present this just a week from now, so we're excited to present this here, but not yet, unfortunately. But we have even made an environmental, let's call it a climate adaptation fund, where you as an NGO from our municipality can apply to given grant, just like we municipalities do or other institutions do for European funding, national funding. So you can apply to those and you can get something in return, so financial aid. So you do implement your own action that contributes to climate adaptation. So this is something very new that we are really enjoying to do. So when we reach the second group, we're working on water resources. So we don't have a water company, municipal water company. This is managed by a private water company that has a concession for quite some time. But obviously they want to be adapted to climate change because they are losing water. They need to save water and resources. So they're upgrading the technology. They're upgrading the piping system, secondary piping systems. And all of this is something that they would already be doing. But it does contribute to climate adaptation. So what we're seeing is that we are more or less validating even further the work that they're doing and with a longer time scope. So they're not just doing this to save money. They're doing this to save money in the long term, but also to help themselves and the quality of the service that they are providing. So this is something extremely interesting for us. Another thing that we're doing already is that I'm going to speak this further on in the presentation, but we're using efficient green spaces. Remember, we are Southern Europe, so there's not much rain available anymore, and it's even reducing a bit more. So we're trying to promote the use of tap water, but also great water for urban cleaning. That means that instead of using tap water for all our services in the street, we're using recycled water, which is extremely interesting to us. Then if we go to the civil protection and health sectors, what we're seeing is we are doing an implementation of a meteorological network. So they allow us to have information about the meteorological variables, but also to have a climatic assessment in the long term. So we have 10 of these scattered through the skies. They provide us real-time information, extremely useful, and you'll see why. And another example that I give you here is, for example, on the left side, you see a graphic, and that's the half-hour registries of our weather station in a fire hazard area. It's a fire-prone area. So what we saw was actually the wind turning and the temperature and the humidity changing nearly live, and that helped the fire department to tackle the fires better. And we could actually see it. Another thing that we're doing is basically we're safeguarding our protected landscape. So when we have a civil protection activity, for example, in what we call an alpha stage, which is during the peak of the summer, now because of what we're seeing is that instead of having 3 months of this, we need now 6 months of this. So we need more resources for the same action, the same visible action. So this is something that we are also tackling with more resources. We're actually engaged also in health. So vector diseases, we do have a couple and they are more prone to happen. No real impact so far, but there are a few things that we are taking into consideration regarding, for example, some palm tree bugs, for example. So we also promote with our CCTVs and flyers and so on, especially with our most vulnerable population, some information about how to keep cool in a heat wave. And we inform people if there's a heat wave coming, if it's a hot day or not, remember to drink water, don't go for sodas or anything like that. Then we have the ecological infrastructure and resilience in urban green spaces. So basically what we're doing is we're transforming the way that we produce our green space. We used to have a lot of lawn, which is something that is very central and Northern European. And people love that because they can play football, they can put their towel and have a picnic, and so on. So basically what we're having here is we're changing the way that we plan and we're using more our autochthonous. It's fairly different from what we have. For example, we're just doing some trails and then we're renovating the biodiversity around it. That's what you see in these photos. We're trying to promote the most efficient use of water possible. And if we invest more on these equipments and infrastructure, we will save in the medium to long term. Let's say just medium and in some cases, even short term, we're saving money with this investment. And we're also qualifying the greenway areas. So we all have greenways here around Europe, but they're mostly connected to rivers. And our rivers have been a bit abandoned. So we've tried to renovate them. And one of them, which is 10 kilometers wide, we've just added this trail and then some cultural remarks. One thing that we've been learning is that we actually are learning a lot by implementing this. So another thing that we're doing is organizing knowledge sharing with webinars and conferences, and even manuals on how to adapt the green spaces and green infrastructure to the new reality of climate change. What can we do? What do we recommend to do? What others are doing? And so if they recommend a spec, we will update this manual again. This is another example of the green trail that we've made here. And I'm really, really happy about this work. So we've made it a minimalistic approach. And basically what we did was restore the functionality of the whole valley, the whole riverbed. And just last month of January, we had a huge flood. So not a huge flood, we had a huge rain rate. And it was the second biggest in 40 years. So it's definitely the T20 that we had. And it was over 90 millimeters, 50 of which occurred in less than 3 hours, more or less in 3 hours. So what happened was there was a huge surge of water coming through the riverbed. This goes to downtown Cascais. And what happens was, well, we had a very minimal flood. The whole area worked as a delaying area, flooding bay, basically, and it worked perfectly. And there was absolutely no damage in this infrastructure. So as you can see on the left side, that's me just 12 hours after the flood. And all we had was deposits of sand. And where I'm standing is actually compacted sand because we can't use impermeable elements such as cement or other elements like that. So we have to do something that if there's a destruction from the flood, it erodes away. So this is the type of creativity that we have to consider in the future. And finally, the last group, which is quite challenging, is the spatial planning. So all these changes must be law-abiding. Otherwise, they're just good practices that sometimes we use, sometimes we don't. And for future reference, when we're building new houses and new urban plannings, we must consider this. We must consider urban areas to be more inclined for ecosystem services, to reduce the flooding risks, to promote the cooling of urban areas, and so on. So we're using planning and urban development as well altogether. So right now, we are a bit over 50% of the implementation rate. And what we've learned so far is that you see there's a distinction between fully implemented actions and continuous implementations. So what we've noticed is that most of our actions is not just a one-shot activity. Just you apply the service or the product, you implement it and you go away. No, this is a change on the way how you act. You constantly implement this in the future. We are then working together with a lot of team, the qualification, engagement, bringing the people. They create a great momentum for change, for transition that we so much need and eager for. We have nature-based solutions which benefit everyone. For example, that green trail, we actually sold it, marketed it as a greenway, so you can go out with your family, go for a walk, enjoy the environment. But most of it was thought considering the climate impacts that it would have, mainly on flooding. And even on fire, we had a fire nearby and the fire department used that to save water. So that was really interesting for us. We must make these good ideas or good practices into law-abiding activities, especially on spatial planning. And finally, if we have this transformative spirit, we will bring innovation. And if we have an innovative city, everybody wins. This is definitely a win-win proposal for everybody. So this concludes my, my presentation. I hope you all enjoyed it. And let me know if you have, oh, I have 2 questions.
Yeah, Joao, many thanks. Yeah, thank you for this excellent presentation. And thanks for bringing an excellent example and for being that active. Yeah, I'm seeing, I think the second question relates to you, and it's especially related to what is the know-how needed by citizens so that they can be involved and support implementation. That would be interesting. And I think the other question is more related to maybe Alexandra, because there was a DG Klima report, I think done by Rumble, about the role of insurance, especially in national insurance schemes. Maybe this can be shared also via the chat. Joao, maybe you might directly take this, how to involve the citizen, what know-how is needed to progress in implementation.
Yeah, okay. So we definitely need to bring the citizen, because the citizen is an active agent of change, and they can be an ally. So the way you bring a citizen is, first, you have to communicate well, so you have to clarify how climate change will impact their lives. But I wouldn't say at a negative level. I would say that this is an opportunity to change, for us to be better and to grasp new opportunities. So this for me is crucial, and there's definitely opportunities on this. That's why I always say that our adaptation activities have a very social or economic impact as well, and I focus equally on that. So that is crucial. And you have to give them something. And when I say give them something, is not only share what they will win, but also what they will benefit from on their daily lives. They will save money if they comply, for example, with more green spaces. They will have more green spaces because we are saving money. Or if they, for example, on mitigation, if they use the public transportation or if they use the bicycle that we are also promoting, they will save a lot of money, be healthier, and just enjoy life a bit more. And then on the decision-making progress, they can actually help us at local scale to co-develop something that they find it useful. And at the same time, the impact or the knowledge that we bring is basically, the added value for climate adaptation. So they want a green space or they want better infrastructure. And we'll explain to them what is the best solution and why in the long term, and why everybody benefits on that. So that's basically a good idea. So you can also, on the know-how, you can also do not webinars, like workshops, bring them on to know exactly how their personal sectors or interests are influenced. So we're talking, for example, on stakeholders in a given sector or citizens in a given residential area where they live or an area that they usually go. And at the same time, you can share this through manuals and through activities as well. So for example, when I gave you the Climathon, it's an experience directed for students and a younger generation. When we organize walking trails in our green spaces or in our greenways, we share the knowledge about why we use these solutions, why some people consider this as minimalist, why there are no benches in the green trail, why there's no night light on the green trail, and we share this knowledge so they learn and they can give us back some solutions of their own, which is extremely interesting, this project. And also working together with the NGOs. So working together and bringing these people there's a lot of, let's call them, political benefits from this, because everybody needs to gain from this. This is relevant. So I do have another question: how you build communication on adaptation importance for private water company? Well, because it's a private water company, what we're trying to work with is that if we comply with adaptation activities, everybody gets, they save more money, they are more prone to fighting hazards. For example, when there's extreme rain rates, they have to, unclog some pluvial water, some systems, some piping systems, and they notice that they're doing this more and more often. So when we provide them with information that in 1 week, our meteorological sensors, or in 2 hours, our meteorological sensors are telling us that there's going to be a flood, and these are the most affected areas, they can act sooner and save resources and damage from that. So what is the benefit? Communication and saving money and being better prepared for the future. And at the same time, we get them more funding from specific projects. This is Transversal 21. We get them specific funding opportunities from European Union on climate adaptation, which is something that on their own, they wouldn't be getting because it's not under your scope of action. So I would say there's an opportunity here that will help you on your core business. And of course, when we say this, there's no one that's going to say no because everybody wins. So this everybody wins is